Okay, guys. Hey, good start this week. For the most part, we all had similar approaches, which is great. So just to clarify a couple things, when you do an annotation, make sure you're adding it to our shared annotations file. So Hannah, I noticed you annotated directly within the article itself, and that's totally fine for your personal notes, right? But be sure you also do a write-up in the shared annotations document, um, formatted the same way as the others. And you can go see how Stormy and Jess did theirs is a modeling if you need that. But do want to have like one centralized place for all of our stuff. Stormy, I saw you read two articles. That's awesome. So thank you for you added the one to the annotations. And then this week, go ahead and add the second one. So I'll say this again later, but this week, the plan is I'd like everyone to do two annotations. And that's because the work for Theta is a little lighter this week, right? So everything is looking good. Jess asked a really good question about how this project is going to take shape. So let me walk you through that a little more clearly. Um, there are essentially going to be four stages, and right now we're firmly in stage one, right? So stage one, literature review. We're kind of stuck here for the moment because we can't move forward with the data collection until I get the IRB amendment approved. I may be able to find a workaround that would allow you to help with stage two, the advertising the survey, collecting more data, which I'll talk about stage two in a second. So I may be able to find a workaround to get us able to do that before the amendment is finalized, but I'm waiting to hear back on that. So for now, stage one is where we're at, and that's the literature review. And remember, the literature review is technically always ongoing, right? So even after we collect data, we're still going to be encountering new scholarship. There's new things published every couple months. But at this stage, the goal is to get your feet wet and gain a foundational understanding of the conversations happening around closed captioning in the scholarly literature. So we're building right now between last week and this week, and I don't know, really the rest of the semester, we're going to build that intellectual groundwork. Eventually, when we publish, we want to be able to argue things like closed captions should be added. Human created captions are better than automated captions. Accurate captions are better than poor quality automated captions. Captioning benefits multiple student populations. Existing style guides don't suit higher education, don't suit the work we do in higher education. So when we make those claims in our literature review, we have to substantiate it with research. We have to substantiate it with evidence. Even if those claims seem maybe like common knowledge, we're for the academic purposes, we have to tie it back to scholarship, right? So your reading now is what's equipping us to make those arguments later. That said, now that I've kind of given you some ideas of the arguments we're trying to make, feel free to go to Google Scholar and find a different article you want to read this week rather than the ones I provided, right? So we're also building an annotated archive we can draw from when we're writing that lit review. So we'll absolutely be reading more scholarship than we end up citing, and that's just how literature, reviews work. I don't know if we'll be in stage one for 1 week or 3 more weeks. It really depends on the IRB timeline, but this is really productive work, right? And honestly, in my opinion, the literature review is the hardest part of an academic paper because you have to truly understand the field, right? To me, when it comes to data analysis and some of these later stages I'm going to talk about now, those are the fun part. Literature reviews are equally time intensive. Okay, so that's stage one. That's where we're at. For this week, the goal is to do two annotations, right? Find two articles, do two annotations. And that's because the work with Theta is lighter this week, right? You're just kind of revising what you did last week with Theta. So do two annotations this week. Stage two, after the IRB is approved, we're going to move to advertising the survey and recruiting more participants. So we already had about 200 responses. And we'd love to get closer to 400 or 500. I don't think reaching 400 to 500 is going to be difficult. We just need to do the groundwork of getting it there. So we'll be working together to identify networks and communities to distribute it to. One area I'd especially like your help with is identifying contacts within the deaf and hard of hearing community. And that's specifically going to mean looking up contacts at like maybe ASL-centric universities, right? Because we're targeting higher education. So that population I know kind of falls outside of the neurodiversity focus of this course, but it's still very important for this study at large because captions ultimately, that's one of the accessibility or disabilities, right, that captions is serving. So we want the ASL community. At the same time, we want to continue to target neurodiverse communities as well. And I have a few college contacts we'll use that we can leverage for that. So that's going to be stage 2. Obviously, this will be articulated and we'll have a strategy at that time. I'm just talking holistically about it. I will equip you with the direction you need to go, the things you need to be sending. You're not just going to be like, hey, go contact these people. There's going to be structure to it. Stage 3, after we've collected, enough participants, at this stage, we're going to bring in Dr. LaRusso, who is our statistician on this project. And we'll start, so he's going to run all the fun little RStudio statistical things that like I just never bothered to really learn because if you just know a statistician, you don't have to know it. But so what we'll do at that time with stage 3 is we're going to start with this descriptive statistics, things like percentages and breakdowns. For example, like what proportion of the respondents identify as having ADHD versus being neurotypical, right? And then we'll move into the inferential statistics. And that's the term for analysis that helps us determine patterns, relationships, statistical significance. And that's where our statistician will really guide us in interpreting what the data actually means. Kind of at the same stage, we're going to be thinking, well, going to be drawing conclusions or inferences or generalizations from that data, right? So we find that it's statistically significant that everybody answered A on this question. Well, what does that mean, right? So that will take us to stage 4, where we'll be writing the paper. And I say the paper, but realistically, once we have the data, we'll likely realize we have enough for 2 to 3 separate papers. And at that point, we'll make strategic decisions about, direction and authorship roles. Because as you recall, remember, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 5 professors on this project and 3 graduate students. So, I mean, I just held up 9 fingers. You didn't see it, but I held up 9 instead of 8. So I mean, yeah, it's actually not uncommon to have an article with 8 people on there, but we just don't need to. So what we'll probably do is identify like the way this can be worked out in 3 different papers and kind of split up authorship that way, which means at that point, if we go that direction, you're writing different literature reviews, right? So I'll tell you one paper that's coming from this out of the sciences, which is still linguistically related, so don't shy away from it, but we're also developing a model for the sciences, right? For the hard sciences, for captioning. That's what that survey is also capturing data on. That's a paper, right? But that lit review is going to look slightly different from the lit reviews on the other ones. They're largely going to have a lot of the same arguments, but they're going to have different sections, obviously, that are discipline specific. So we're going to deal with that and think through that when we get there. Okay. I don't really want you to worry or ask too many questions there because we're just not there. We don't know yet what all that looks like. So here's the thing. I do think we can get through all 4 stages by May. I'm not really worried about that timeline because we have so many people working on this. The thing I'm most anxious about is the amended IRB so we can just like finish with our participants, right? But it's kind of out of our control. So we really have 2.5 months, essentially, a little less than. That's not impossible. Okay. And some of the article writing and revisions and stuff might continue past this class, which I don't think you're going to have a problem with because it's an article, it's going to be published. So now let's see here. For this week, let's continue the annotations. I haven't added mine yet, but I will. This is a collaborative project and, I'm contributing alongside you. Obviously, I've done a lot of the groundwork, so I'm still ahead of you. For the record, no, it doesn't matter. Many of the articles I assigned are actually ones that I read several years ago, and I've actually used like in those recordings and stuff that you watch. So your work is, helping me refresh my memory and bringing me back into some of those conversations. So again, this week, 2 annotations. Stormy, you already read, a second article last week. So this week, do the annotation. That would count as one of the 2 for this week. If everyone does 2, we'll continue to make good progress. And also, you can use the articles I put in there, but there, like I said, there's new scholarships. So you're welcome to uh, find something else, start going down a different rabbit hole. Don't go down a rabbit hole. Stay on the path, but there are sub paths on our path. So reading takes time, especially when you're new to a topic. Maybe these first couple annotations, feel long because you're entering a new, like, I don't know, community with this scholarship. So it's going to get faster the more familiar you become with the literature. And also read each other's annotations. You don't need to make comments on them, right? But that's just the benefit of working as a team. We're kind of dividing the labor so we don't all have to read every single article. But I hope that clarifies things. Let's keep going. You guys are off to a really strong start.